Okay. Hello, hi, and welcome to everyone who is listening to this podcast. I am Sri Krishna Priya, and if I have to introduce myself to a 10-year-old, I'd say I am playing with computers that has as much intelligence as humans. Maybe not entirely, but yes, right now we are in that phase. So I have lots of interests that span across various areas. One of them is AI, and being an estate lead, I have eye for quality, and I love to connect with people, especially intelligent people. Speaking of intelligent people, here I have Richard, head of engineering AI transformation at FE Fundinfo, who has gracefully accepted to do this podcast with me. This has been in the cards for past 1 year, and when Richard said he's coming to Chennai, I thought, why not ask him? And he said yes. And the topic that we are going to discuss about is smoking hot. Let's say, the entire world is talking about it, but we don't want to, graze around. We want to go deep and think about it a lot more than others. And we want to be very genuine about how people can actually, step up at this time. So the topic that we have here is, are we replacing engineers or are we redefining their roles? So before that, I'll let Richard introduce himself.
Thanks, Shree. It's a pleasure to be here and a chance to talk about a topic that's kind of on everybody's minds. Um, I'm head of engineering at FE fundinfo and also lead on AI transformation within the business, which broadly means I spend a lot of time thinking about AI strategy. And over the last few years, I've been doing implementation of LM and large language models um, across the business in specific areas, tooling, in infrastructure, and more within products. And that's changed over the last few years into much more of a transformation role as the whole organization adopts those changes and starts to think about new ways of working. A lot of my role now is helping them to think ahead, find those opportunities, and see how we join the human and the AI together to make a more effective whole. So we'll hopefully get to talk about some of those things.
Yeah, you usually make people think ahead. Even when I joined FE Fund Info, he was the one who actually, I had one idea, and being a head of engineering, it's not, something that you do to help implement an idea, but he did that, and that's what I admire about Richard. And I think most of the people at FE Fund Info admire that quality in Richard. Okay, let's go into the segment one, the big question that everybody is having in their head. That's, are we replacing or redefining? So the first question is, when someone says AI is replacing engineers, what is your gut reaction?
No, absolutely not. AI is going to enhance engineering and enhance it to a radical degree. Replace, not so much. I think we'll always need engineers, but I do think that what engineers do, how we value engineers, is going to change substantially. And that's a very different style of engineering. We we won't need engineers who are very granular and specific about a single language or a single area of engineering. I think that specialism very much is being taken by the AI. And that's not a change that's going to happen overnight, and it's going to take 3 to 5 years, maybe longer. But we see it already with the quality of code, the way the AI can suggest architectures, it's embedding standards. I think the engineer role has to change. Engineers are not going to be the people who write code. They're going to be the creatives that take concepts and turn them into fact. And I think that's a big change. We're asking people to stop valuing themselves on the knowledge they have, start to value themselves on the skills that they have. And you are still learning what those sort of skills and capabilities are. So we will end up in a situation where we still need engineers. The engineering that we're moving to is, I almost say nothing like, but very different from where we are now. Will it be the same number? Maybe. In a growth company, I'd hope so. Some companies, as they always do, will take opportunity to cut cost. Still some debate whether there will be a cutting of cost, whether that cost just moves to the AI instead of being a saving. There's definitely going to be companies that look to cut costs, because companies always look to cut costs. But for a company like ours that's growing, and many others, it's an opportunity to do more, be more. And part of the exploration we're on is, what does that more look like? How do we get there? How do we get there faster? And how do we do that? And if we are suddenly 5 times more effective, what does that look like to the business? If we don't know what to do with 5 times more effective because we haven't planned for it, then the CFO is going to cut costs because that's more capacity than we need. But if we are cognizant of the journey and therefore the next need and the next need and the next need, we are thinking about, okay, how do we use that space? What's next? What happens when? In the first surge, we use that space. We're catching up with technical debt and all those things that have been a burden for a long time. And that's a temporary thing. You can solve technical debt now. The second phase then is we catch up on the kind of backlog of nice to have features. What's the third phase? What happens after that? You know, if you've got your technical debt done, your system is running effectively, you've caught up with the features the customer wants, where do you go after that? And I think that's the problem that everybody has to think about. Like, quite often we get focused on the very short term, but our teams are developing and delivering that short term, starting to deliver that second phase. We have to be thinking about the third and what comes after that.
Okay, so what you're telling is that we need more creatives in engineering right now. And if you are looking for a long game, then you don't look at the first 2 phases where things get done faster, but what happens next, right?
Yeah. And being a creative in engineering, I was listening to people say, oh, everybody's got to have taste or be creative. What does that mean to an engineer? It doesn't mean that we have to become artists or musicians. As engineers, we create with code. And so it means thinking about what works within an application, what good architecture looks like. That's a creative function of an engineer. How it fits together and how do you creatively solve the UX experience flow? How do you think about scaling and creatively solve the problems that may come up there, looking for race conditions and other risk events that happen in software? That's our creativity as engineers.
Got it. So let's go to the skill that you were talking about. Apart from being creative, you were mentioning that there should be some skills that the engineers should have. So can you name a skill that was there 5 years ago, and you think now it's outdated or irrelevant?
So I think any skill that required you to know a specific language and be very good at that single language is now, that depth of skill is irrelevant. So in testing, take, for example, being able to write test cases in that particular style of format. That was a significant skill. It took a lot of time to learn and to get the habits because it didn't fit nicely into a natural way of speaking. And so that was a skill that many people developed and struggled hard to get the hang of. And now AI does that for us. You have to have an idea of what it should look like, so you check it's right. But you'll focus more on the content, not on the skill of creating the structure.
Okay. But if I want to contradict a bit here, right? So you remember mainframe, and there are banks that still have it because mainframe is more secure than all the latest. So if in case there would be one skill that would tread past everything and say look like mainframe in next 5 years, what would that be? I mean, it's not a skill, like it's a technology that would be there.
I think it's all those language skills.
Okay.
And the reason for that is, everything's going to hang around a little bit. Things don't go away overnight. You look back to the Industrial Revolution when farm labourers moved into the cities to get jobs because machinery was coming into the farms. That didn't happen overnight, and it took time. And we still have farmers. We still need people to run those farms. We just have fewer of them. So in places, those skills are going to stay and be needed, but in the majority, they're going away.
Yeah. I'll just present the analogy. Like I was seeing on movie where it was older days in the UK, where there would be a lightman who would manually go and light at the evening, and in the morning he'll climb the ladder. So we are in the phase where software engineering shifting, and we all look like a lightman. Right now we are still figuring out whether I should still be switching off that light in a ladder, or I have a switch and I just switch it off.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And if you're a light man lighting that and your job starts to go away, seeing that happen and working out when to move to something else and how to move to something else is really, really difficult.
Yes.
Because what you see inside the experience, if you like, is your job being taken away, and it's really hard to see what else is out there and how that's going to move. And I think the same thing will happen in engineering. It will be easy to see slightly changed technical jobs. Okay, so you could be an engineer now and move to being maybe an architect, or an engineer that drives the agents, and trying to just produce more. I think that's a mistake. I think there's a value in not trying to produce more, but understand where your value is, produce differently. And I guess we maybe drift off the topic a little bit, but what I mean by that is, as an engineer, you're given tasks to execute. There's a whole flow of process that gets tasks to the engineer to get done. And the easy answer is to try and do more and be a faster engineer. I think the right answer is to work out how you become a different sort of engineer. Like, people have for a long time talked about engineers becoming managers. That's shorthand for that change. It's not quite going to be like that. But it's the idea there is a different role there. Okay. You have to go and find. Right.
Okay. Um, so we talked about the past.
Mhm.
Now let's talk about the future. So it's 2030 and we're all there. So what do you think an engineer would be spending his daily time on?
I think the engineer spends his daily time taking ideas or needs from the customer and very closely to the customer, maybe directly from the customer or in partnership with a product person, um, and translates those into language that the AI system can understand, um, and validates the output that's coming back to iterate, course correct the AI system. So they work in partnership because of pairing. It's kind of a partnership. I don't know how large that volume is. I think again back to the industrial kind of change where start with the work that a machine could do was quite limited, but it was definitely faster than a single person. And over time, that's got bigger. We invented robots that were more flexible, and that meant the output of a single person grew again. And then multi-axis machining a milling machines, they're more flexible again, and that multiplied the capability of a single person. I think the same thing will happen in software development.
Mhm.
We don't know what those innovations are that multiply the person, but there's definitely this person machine relationship that together are a multiplier of where they are now.
Mm.
And I think at the pace we're going at, in 5 years, we've probably gone through 3 or 4 of those multiplying events. But there is almost a limit to how fast we can do that. So the things I think will go away over that time, though, is operational kind of support and management of those systems. I think the machine can do that largely for us. Not quite yet, but I think it will come. And I think architecture standards, we think about that as an important part of building guardrails right now. I think in 5 years' time, we'll accept that we've codified that as well as possible into the system. Why would we fight the system?
Mm.
So I think right now we tell the machine how our code is. 5 years' time, our code will move to align with the standards that we've effectively agreed as an industry and have been codified into the machine. And that movement will allow us to be more flexible. So standardization, again, I think back to industrial change, that was a necessary, like, when you start and everybody builds their nuts and bolts differently, and they're putting things together specifically for that system they're building. There was a necessary standardization so that things could swap across and change more easily, and we became more adaptive. I see that there will be a standardization of that sort of thing. So in software, it's a standardization of how we write software, what uses camel case, how variables are named. That sort of standardization makes software much more fungible, makes it more maintainable for the machine, but it makes it easier for our people to move across and look at different software and become less ingrained to a specific thing, which means that we can all move and use our talents more easily and more effectively. And gone are the days of spending 6 months learning a new piece of software when you move into a new team.
Mhm.
That just goes away.
Yeah, I can see the shift even now. You just put your code into the AI, and AI is able to comprehend and tell you what it is about. So yeah, I can see the shift even now. it's language agnostic, as you said. But among these things, are 2 points I wanted to talk about. I mean, go in depth. So when you said AI can manage, right? Um, I do see there would be people who would be managing these AI agents, right? Like an orchestrator. And when there are people, there would be people to manage them. So I'm not disagreeing with you, but the number of people who would be managing these, they would have the skills to manage both the AI and the which gets intelligent day by day, and
Yeah.
people who are able to orchestrate the AI. But and another skill I think that we want to emphasize is communication, because um, when we are talking with developers, it's a different language, right? You say what we have to do, but then when we are thinking in the product perspective, when we want to go in depth and develop, and you either directly communicate with the clients or you work very closely with the product people, you are cutting out a layer, and that means everybody essentially who want to get through this wave of AI, uh, as an AI engineer or a product engineer, should develop their communication skills, right? They have to talk business. They have to talk.
Yeah. And I think you clarified it at the end, but it's not just communication skills. It is that shift from talking engineering to talking product and talking business, becoming more connected to the business.
Yes.
Yes, that chain of instruction that is the current product process and software development process collapses down to two people talking to each other at most. And when we say we talk about the language of business, it's being able to understand what somebody means when they talk about value, return on investment, application of capital, whatever it is thinking about that, but also understanding what a customer might mean when they start talking about their workflow, their systems. So you can pick up and understand that. And that requires skills in listening, in kind of that skill of taking new ideas and converting them into something and making them understandable. So that's a skill that we can learn by looking at new ideas frequently. I think there are other skills in that space. What we don't have to learn is we don't have to learn the knowledge of business, like the information skill. We don't have to go out and go, okay, I need to know business, so I need to learn all this language. Or I need to know product development, so I have to learn it like we were at school. I don't think that's the future. I think piling more knowledge into us isn't the future. Piling in the skills to ingest other people's ideas, comprehend them quickly, and be able to be opinionated about them. It's really important. I think the other piece that's hard to articulate is there's two. There's sort of having an idea of what the target state is in your mind and holding that in your mind. And in the past, we've always sort of relied on the BA or the product owner would take that idea of the target state and then they'd spend a few weeks trying to write it down and we'd pass that around. And it's never quite the same. But collaboratively gaining that idea of the target state, and your job is to make it so with the AI. And so the skill of communications, skill of taking complicated ideas and articulating them through graphics, through text, through voice, whatever it is. And these are skills that we learn and are skills that we can practice. at university, some universities will teach things like taking a long piece of work and consolidating and summarizing it. Now, obviously, you don't have to actually do that anymore because the AI will do that. But the skill of being able to take all the ideas in a long piece of work and kind of collate them in your mind to be able to push them out, that's the skill that you're going to need. You're just not going to do the task of doing it in writing anymore. You're going to a lot more take ideas, collect those ideas, formulate them into a structure that can be created into software. That's the creative phase, and then output them through communication.
Right. Got it. So, so past, future, now let's come to the present. And we can't, deny that there is a fear, right?
Yeah.
There is a fear that what I would be doing. We have defined certain skills that were there and that's going to be there in the future. But we should be answering this question as well on the fear of replacement. What if I get replaced? I read an article which said someone, just resigned because they feared that AI, it was not a company, it was them taking a call, thinking that AI would be replacing them. That's a rash call, I would say. But still, at every level in the software world, there is a fear that they would get replaced, right? Irrespective of whether they are in management or in software engineering. So, is it psychological or, or is it genuinely warranted? The fear is, yeah,
I think it's perfectly normal to have fear when you don't know the future and don't know the needs that you have of how to manage that future when it's completely unknown. 100% fear is the natural reaction. There's something dark and looming out there. We don't know what it looks like, and it can be scary. And then a pigeon walks in. It's that fear. Some people lean into the fear. Some people find it overwhelming. I think an important thing for us to do is to talk about it, so that there's a greater chance of being able to work through the fear. So thinking about that and what's changing, what would I do and what wouldn't I do? I would not go and become a plumber or a farmer. That is not the path. Yes, we might not have enough of some of those roles, but that's not the answer to what's changing. It feels very aggressive. We've been through the farming revolution, kind of been through that second phase of industrial revolution to knowledge work. Running back to that known space, I don't think that's the way through it. It will work for some people. There'll be plenty of examples on the news of Brian who became a taxi driver and earns more money, is happier. Great. That's probably the job that Brian should have been in all the time. If this triggers it, that's okay. Sorry, Brian got stressed about this. I think the path forward though is to be thinking about the behaviors and capabilities that help us through this. Again, those that can step boldly into that dark space are going to be better off in general than those that wait to see what happens. Waiting to see what happens puts you at the mercy of everybody else. And to be fair, we don't know what will happen, and we don't know yet what all the jobs are, and we don't know yet what all the companies are. And as always with companies, some will succeed and some will not, and there's risk in that. There isn't a right answer to this, but I think there are a few things that we can do to make ourselves more interesting and employable for the future. And it comes back to some of the things we've already talked about.
Okay.
About communication, about being able to take ideas, and translate them out, being able to hold the ideas in your head so that you can take ideas directly. I think the other ones are to be able to be opinionated, and share that opinion accurately, fairly. That doesn't mean to be dogmatic, but just have an opinion, because if you're working with AI, it doesn't know, and you need to be able to have that opinion and articulate it. I think that's one of the reasons why we've kind of lazily talked about having management skills. A lot of it is having an opinion and saying we should just go this way. You know, management fails when nobody has in the hierarchy has an opinion and it all bubbles up to the top level. Everything solidifies. So having an opinion helps drive outcomes. And generally we're okay with them being the wrong outcomes, because most businesses, because we're moving forward. But everybody's sitting back and waiting to see, then everything stops. There's zero value in that. 100% zero, less than zero value in that. So moving forwards. I think personally, I don't know that this will work for everybody in every company, but the ones that I see succeeding the most are taking initiative and trying these things, and are prepared to fail. We run a lot of labs and a lot of opportunity for people to try things. We've just finished a hackathon. I think last year I counted that as across the engineering org alone, we were running 10 different labs, experimenting with things. We build software that we then very quickly throw away because it gets superseded. But the act of doing that brings a huge amount of learning and experience and stories to tell. And I think that is extremely important and valuable. If you go into work and say, hey, I had this great idea, so I built this thing, you'll have a conversation that goes one of a couple of ways. One way is the other people go, yeah, that's fantastic, let's build forwards on that. Other people might go, yeah, that's okay, but kind of we've got this other thing over here that's staying, maybe we merge them. Another organization saying, what are you doing? That's crazy. Leave that organization, go somewhere else. Organizations that lean into that creativeness, I think, are going to be the organizations that really flourish. And how we do that. I spend time at the minute thinking about how we build safety into creativity. I want not just on the engineering side, but everybody across the business to be able to create system software and solve their own solutions. But how do I do that so that what they produce can be maintained, made safe, looked after, and enable the creativity within the organization? That effectively right now is my creative job, is to enable other people's creativity. And I think doing all of that, and kind of organizations and people who are forward looking and try things, that's the skill, that's the capability. It's not really a skill, maybe a behavior, whatever we call it, that allows growth into those new emerging, this unstable kind of world that we now live in. So yeah, 100% do that.
Okay, so what you're saying is fear is psychological. If I want to put it in a quality assurance perspective, right, just adding a history to this. So 20 years back, there was a tool called UFT that came in, and everybody said, oh, I'm going to lose the job as a quality assurance engineer. And then there are, until now we have Selenium, Playwright, and everything coming into market. Thing is, they thought automation can actually, replace a quality assurance engineer. But as we evolved, as the role evolved, we became different. We cared more about the product, right? And then based on that, automation evolved. And yes, right now I can just put everything to AI, but I still have to have the opinion, as you said, to say this is what you have to test. Otherwise, AI is going to throw tests that's going to be green all the time. And right, having opinions is very important.
Yeah.
And to go back a bit, 2 years back when we had the first Copilot demo, I was talking with someone at FV. I don't know what I am going to do because it looks like Copilot can do most of the things. But usually whenever there is a new thing coming up, this is the conversation that I have with the people. And next day, I'm ready to pivot. I'll lean into it. I'll see what's there inside that, what I can do about it. And there are a lot of people in FE who do that, right? And that's why we are where we are right now, right? Yeah. Um, and then let's go into a little bit of process right now.
Okay.
Yeah. So there are different processes that we follow, the Scrum, the Kanban. What do you think will happen when AI, when we go AI first as a team?
I think Scrum is a set of processes and ceremonies designed to organize and herd people. That's unnecessary. So for me, Scrum is dead. Kanban's a really interesting one. Kanban in the sense that we've been doing it till now. Queue of tasks, analyze, build, test, deploy, finish. What's the point of that? Like, all of those steps could be done by the AI. So Kanban has a future, but it feels more like idea, build, document, price, its market. Feels more like a product process than a development process. In terms of specifically thinking about how we track development process, I think there's still a need for a backlog, a list of things to be done. Because although high performing teams will have very short, shallow backlogs, there may be that you're building a backlog for a product that you don't have any engineering on at all at the time, and sort of you're using that to develop ideas, thought, combine things together. There's always going to be a list need somewhere. I think then the other end of the cycle is, for a lot of places, that list, then the PBIs becomes the log of work that's been done. But that's duplicative with the repo. So you have two logs of work that's been done. So I think you probably need the repo. So I'm still pondering this, but the most extreme case is you have a tool that manages epics and features. Everything else gets done, and you have the repo. That is your log of work, if you like.
Okay.
And you don't need anything else in between. I think that's a little bit simplistic. I think there will have to be a few things. What about state tracking and various things? But it certainly doesn't have to be the level of complexity that it is now. For that reason, I think systems like Linear are likely to do really well. Complicated systems like Azure DevOps, we would probably move away towards something simpler. But I don't yet know exactly what that process is. I don't want our people to be managing the path of work and every piece of work. If I need a tool, I need the AI to track that work for itself. It's likely to be a team of AI agents, to be fair, so there's going to be handoff. But I definitely don't want the human working in that space.
Okay.
And the human works above that. Human works at the exception level and at the inputs, and occasionally at the outputs, but ideally not.
Mm.
And so where this process goes wrong, something unexpected happens. Our people work at that level on things that's gone wrong and unexpected, not in the detail of the tool. So if that means I have to take the tool completely away from the people for a while to break that habit, then that might be necessary.
Mm.
And that probably leads to some way thinking about getting rid of the tool. So in summary, I think Scrum goes away. I think there is still a need for some sort of tracking, but it's purely how do the agents talk to each other to track the work that they're doing and how they hand off to each other. So the tools that we have at the minute are not fit for agents, they're fit for humans. So there's some sort of new layer that will form. And then above that, the humans are going to have a different set of tooling and systems. The work I'm doing at the minute, I'm thinking about agentic development engineers uses single summary pages as jobs to be done for the human as the output. It is a simple, straightforward way of doing it. It's not clear that it will scale. I think there'll be a new tooling layer coming. But all of this kind of standard stuff, really.
Okay, if you say Scrum is dead, basically why we have those many number of ceremonies in Scrum is because developers don't like to talk and we want people to talk about what they are doing, right? So where does actually human connect with human when we have AI systems being orchestrated at higher level? You said there would be inputs. I imagine these inputs to be very intelligently, very, let's say again use the word opinionated and be very specific about what they want. And there is output. And in between everything, the AI does, right? So where is the human connection in this?
I think before I answer that, I want to answer another bit about how I see us working with agents in the future.
Mhm.
When you have a junior employee and you ask them to write a Word document on something, and they produce it and it's not quite the way you want it, you've got two choices. You either go in and correct it and do it yourself, or you explain to them why it's not right and how to do it correctly. At the minute, we are very often going into the agents and saying, oh, that was crap. This is the right answer. The future, we need to move to the point where our people go in and say, okay, you've misunderstood. Let's understand what you've misunderstood. Let's change and fix the context. Let's create more clarity, not give the answer, but create the capability to do it right. That's long been a good management doctrine that we're all told we should do with our people. The same applies to our agents. And so I think about that. And I think that's really important in how we think about then control and management of agents. It comes back to our people work together on identifying where the agents are, not in the place of understanding that you'd like them to be, and then correct for that. It's a different abstraction layer of work. You're not correcting the code they write, you're correcting how they've interpreted the instructions. And that abstraction layer change is important. So we create a new set of teams and functions that do that. And our challenge is how we will move to that level. At the minute, we're not mature enough. Systems are not there, quite there yet. But you look at the work that's happening with memory, with kind of guidance, with skills, with all these other things. They are very quickly moving us to that situation where we change the context. We don't change the agent. I think over time that kind of picking up the new model and assuming that's going to be better, there's diminishing returns. the way we structure
Mm.
is where the returns are. So I think thinking about the existing framework of getting things done, that does go away, and it gets replaced with a new framework sitting at a slightly higher, more abstracted level.
Mm.
And that will probably have some very human traits, and some of it will feel similar to what we had in Scrum and things like that, because there's going to be a how do we process the work, how do we think about it. The work itself is different, the abstraction is different.
Mm.
So a new set of tools.
A new set of framework,
Yeah.
like Scrum, but not exactly.
Scrum. It's not for software development.
Mm.
It's for agent growth and learning.
Agentic orchestration. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. That's nice. Yeah. So let's dive into the next segment. Okay. So we talked about how, what are the skills, what's the past, what's the future, and everything. Now we want people to get hired, let's say. Okay. If you want to hire someone right now, okay, what does the job interview look like? You are hiring a traditional software engineer, but the role is right now very blunt and we don't have defined set of criteria, right? So how do you hire?
Very good question. And there isn't a clear answer to this. I've hired a few people recently. And we didn't do a skills test. What we did was have a conversation with them about what they'd done recently and how they thought about it and how they created. And those that were successful were the ones that could have that conversation and just, understood the need, created the output, and talked that through. None of them told me about their kind of technical skills. In fact, at one point, one of the interviews, we had to go back at the end and just go, we had a really good conversation about how you create. Just want to check that you can code as well. Just in case. Because it just hadn't come up. This guy was great. He got how to think about it. The idea of having coding skills in interviews really is going away. I think there is a need to formalize that. And I don't know what that looks like yet. I'm not hiring enough people to be strongly opinionated about it. My focus right now is helping everybody that's in the organization make the most of the change. So that I haven't had a need to formalize it. I think they'll probably come down to some creativity tests. That might be we produce a written description of a system and ask somebody to build it. It might be that we show them a video of somebody talking through a system that already exists and what they like and don't like, and give them that system and ask them to change it.
Okay.
We might not give them the code. That really doesn't matter. Like, the code's so unimportant. But I think that how then they can articulate that idea that they've taken, ingested, converted, and pushed out as instruction. That's what I want to see. If I can see that, either through a conversational interview or through a set of structured tasks, then that's the interview for me.
Okay. So I think the next question you have already answered. So you don't need a CV. You need them to do things, show things.
Yes, you need a CV. You don't need a CV that's a list of technical skills. A lot of CVs lead on all this stuff that I did, and I know my CV used to be like that back in the day. I think CVs that show what people have created and how they worked with others CVs that show I created this, I partnered with this person to build that. This is how we moved this forwards, and pictures it in this style of the outcome, not the task. That's important.
So you want someone who has a CV that's outcome oriented and
Yeah.
right. So again, there is some term called generalist that's been overused across all platforms, right? So is it genuinely the future, or you think you need some niche as well?
Genuinely the future. We've started playing with the term builder, possibly junior, senior staff builder. When you don't differentiate by skill and you don't differentiate by where in the pipeline they sit, and yes, you'll see, which is we do sometimes with managers, and the management layers aren't there, so you don't need team leads, managers, senior managers, whatever else you have in your hierarchy that goes on forever. Then the need for a large range of roles starts to fold. That is the description of the work that gets done. The job title is going to be different because job titles are cultural, and they are not particularly good descriptors of the work that gets done. So the job, I think, collapses towards builder. I think job titles will trail that by a long way. Change in job title as a symbol of progression in organizational capability, or is really deeply ingrained in it's how we talk to our parents about how we're doing at work, it's how we express it to our friends. So there's a definite challenge that we have to manage through if the role is kind of consolidating towards builder. And it doesn't matter where you came from, whether it was through test or through Scrum Master or whatever, and it consolidates towards builder. That's going to be a fact. There's going to be a set of builders. I think there's also going to be a set of operators. And they're the agent operators that think about context for the agent. They are looking at the success of the agents running, whether that's running the operations of the system, maintaining the quality of security, or building new features. Those operators, I think, are a necessary piece. And they will start with roles like architect, SDET, DevOps in a small number, thinking about guardrails. But they also move into becoming the operators of the machinery that is the software system. And so I feel we'll have builders and we'll have operators. And if we can have fewer operators, we can have more builders. So that's probably a different bit of conversation, but kind of that balance. The more we've got our system running well, that we need fewer operators to run it, the more we can invest people into being builders and building new and excellent stuff.
Okay.
You think about an organization now might be 50-50 between people who maintain the effort going into maintain software systems and the effort going into expand them. Some companies will be different ratios, but let's pick 50-50. The future is probably, if we do it right, I'd love to see it as 90% build, 10% operators. But that's a journey that we have to go
on. Okay, so I just wanted to jump a bit into the guardrails that we are talking about. So that is security. That is also your product working right. Not just how we build, but how the customers perceive your product outside, right? Um, so when you think about this guardrails, I already think that certain roles, for example, at lead, estate, the security engineer, they move between teams, right? So sometimes, in many organizations, they are horizontal and they don't get stuck to a single product. They generally have idea about everything and they move across teams. I also think that these builders and operators would become like that. So yeah, because you don't want a specific skill to do that. You become a generalist. So you become horizontal irrespective of which company or which product you are working on right now. Right?
I think so. If you have products as the vertical and you have certain cross-cutting skills, as you've described, of estate, architect, and so on, and you've got a number of verticals of product, and in there you have engineers doing work. And alongside that, you have a cross-cutting skill around the PM and the BA. All of that vertical work consolidates where they maybe have different processes and practices. That consolidates. That separation of teams, there's just no need for it, because all of that work in the middle is now a set of agents. Why would you have a set of agents for product one with different guardrails or constraints to product two, product three? And I think as we start doing it, yes, you do, because everybody feels their product's special and unique, and they're all wrong. But we start with that. But the path is that these things consolidate down. So your cross-cutting people move, they stay sitting across, but now they don't have to sit across and go and work out what they have to do for product one, and then they move to product two and have a look at that, catch up and move to product three. Now they're working across all those products in a single interface effectively, which is a standard set of controls and guardrails that the company is happy with. So their work gets actually easier and clearer. The ability to kind of have weird bypasses or somebody going off track starts to reduce. So our sense of confidence in things like security can go up because we're clear about the guardrails. Guardrails stop being policy and become codified. Therefore, our guardrails have gone from a please to a you must. And a lot of companies have spent a lot of time trying to convert their guardrails into you must and use blueprints and other constraints and controls. That just now becomes easier to do. And that cross-cutting group has to balance security concerns with pace, with flexibility, but they have better vision. That's what's going on. So they can do that in a way that until now may have taken months or years to get changes to happen. That consolidation, that confidence and consistency makes change easier. And I think that's underrated in its value.
Okay. Yeah. So let's say you have a set of builders mostly, and then there are a group of operators, and then there is a system that now breaks. Okay. What happens now?
The product breaks in production.
Yes.
Okay. So the ideal future state is that the AI system picks that up, identifies what went wrong, restores service, and then makes a decision about whether it should code a change or not.
Okay.
And then that code change goes through. Systems break in production because of unknown things.
Mm.
I think that is the hardest thing for us to get our AI agents to do. Because the balance and the sensitivity between, is this a one-off that I should just restart and see what happens? Or is there an underlying problem, and tracking through to where the issue really is difficult, particularly in distributed systems.
Mm.
And we all know from having done that sort of analysis, it's easy to disappear down a rabbit hole, convinced it's a certain thing, and spend quite a lot of time working on that, and then find that actually it wasn't that thing, it was something else that you hadn't thought about, or you weren't aware of. So the concern for me is how the AI agents will cope with that. I think within a short amount of time, they will be very, very good at it.
Mm-hmm.
In part because of the breadth of data we can give them. That's just quite hard to give a human. However, one of the human skills AI doesn't have is the ability to look at a complicated system, get rid of all the noise, and go, let's go down that path. Where quite often we build tools and AI that wants the right answer. And in operational failures, the right answer might not exist. So I think we have to have AI agents that are really good at saying, not sure, let's have a chat to them. Escalation.
Okay.
We're quite used to those systems. There's no reason why we can't build them. They're just challenging. And we're moving so fast on everything else. Very focused on getting the other bits built at the minute.
Got it. Okay. Okay. So I think we just moved a bit away from the, how we hire. Let's get into it again. So what happens to the junior engineers in the future? Are we hiring junior engineers because we already have experienced people who has opinions and can take a call, like in a situation where a system fails, right? Where do these people really fit in? How can they actually, a young group of people, let's say 22, looking at the future and say, what am I going to do? So what is your advice to them?
Build. Junior engineers are our builders of the future. In a great place, bypass the years of slogging through the hierarchy. They've got a jump start. Yes, you just come out with a whole load of education that's become less valuable. However, your flexibility, adaptability, and malleability of mind puts you in a great place. You've come through an education system and you know how to learn. So I think as junior engineers, there's still great opportunities. I think the thing to do is to be building, be creating, whether that's at your current work or within your studies, and then showing it off and talking confidently about why you build and create. To me, it doesn't matter whether that building creating is a whole blown application that's huge and complicated, or a thing that just solved the problem for you. A quick tool that made managing your cricket team easier, a thing that you do at home to track how much you drink water. It actually doesn't matter. It's the fact that you are thinking about a problem and creating, and that's pretty important. We're just going to have to pause for a second.
Richard, hi, Krishnapriya. Sorry for the interruption.
These may have non-veg Chinese.
Yeah. You go.
Sorry, I could see him walking up and down. I
No
didn't
problem.
speak to him.
Okay. We talked a lot about, judgment, right? How do you measure judgment? You already mentioned that in your recent interviews, you asked them to think about what they have done and, talk about it. And then you actually went back and saw whether they are able to code or not, right? But how do you measure human judgment in an interview? Because it's just 1 hour.
It's really difficult because judgment is a non-deterministic sense. And so I measured judgment with my own judgment. So there isn't a way to say if you've got good judgment. I think the way we see good judgment is through the things you create, the decisions you make, and the choices you make in that creation process. So I think it comes back to show the creation, be able to talk about it, talk about the decisions you made. Don't talk too much about the technical decisions you made. I see a lot of that in interviews. I use this version of SQL and this, but talk about the choices you made on that, why you did it, what's important, what wasn't important, what you chose to focus on, what you put to one side and didn't do. That judgment and choice. That's a really good way of articulating it. But there isn't a score. There isn't an exam for judgment. There isn't an exam for taste. And this is a hugely difficult problem.
Okay.
We've grown up and our education system says we're going to measure you by your knowledge. And now I'm coming along and saying, I don't really care about your knowledge. I care about your behavior and your style and your approach to things. I care about all of those extracurricular activities you did at school, all of the ways you learned to problem solve. If I think into the school system, how were you involved in music, and where did you create in school play? How did you problem solve when you did outdoor pursuits or in your sport? How's that shown your capability to adapt and problem solve? I feel more like the extracurricular of school is going to be more of the school of the future.
Okay.
Because the knowledge has been taken by the AI.
Yeah, I also think when I am, thinking about my daughter, right? So I am very good at academics, but I have done a lot of extracurricular things that's actually helping me when I get stressed out or burned out at work. But the future generation is going to be concentrating more on what we did extra and the decisions that they made there. And academics provides a structure, discipline that they have to have when they are making these creative decisions, right? So I think, and when it comes to judgment, making all these decisions in different areas would be helping you to go there.
And being clear, like there's always been a question in interviews of where did you fail, what did you get wrong?
Yes.
And it's always been a bit passe about an opportunity to show a failure that was actually a strength and all that stuff. I think the better answer to that sort of question now becomes the story of the journey that you go on in creating, of the cycles of the iterations. Failure isn't failure, it's part of that process, and it can show your problem solving skills. I built a piece of software 18 months ago that was great, agentic tool. It, by most measures, it was complete failure. But it had huge significance because it moved the whole engineering organization forwards in how it thinks about agentic tools.
Okay.
Is it a failure? Isn't it a failure? Yeah, it's definitely a failure because we used it for we got about halfway through the rollout and then threw it in the bin because something better had come along.
Okay.
So those things, those learnings, this change, they're good stories, really good stories to show you did. There's courage in stopping. That sunk cost angles. Don't keep sinking cost. If it stops, recognize things have changed and stop and move on. I think that's important. It's always been important in kind of management, senior management in business. I think it's now important to everybody to be able to think about.
Okay.
We do it in our personal lives because we do it with our relationships with others. Deciding to sort of start or end a relationship is actually doing that thing. So we all know how to do it, but none of us find it easy. But
Yeah.
being able to articulate that, that's interesting and valuable.
Yeah. Going back to the, the builder, the, orchestrator or the operator has who orchestrates all these teams, right? So when an interview comes, how I see it would be in mostly in many of the organizations are now adapting to it. I think this orchestrator who orchestrates the people and the agents and the builders would, the builders are the people, right? So they would be directly going into the interviews because they are going to be the hiring managers now. And
I don't quite see it like that.
hmm,
So I don't think directly orchestrators manage builders.
okay,
I see them alongside each other.
okay,
It's a little bit more, how would I articulate it? Do you see a massive breakdown in hierarchy? So I think a lot of hierarchy starts to go away.
okay,
But I think orchestrators manage agents, kind of, they're looking for agent efficiency. And builders are using agents. Okay, so maybe an analogy that would work is when we build product and systems and put them in production, we may lean on infrastructure people. They build, configure and maintain that infrastructure for us as developers to deploy into. The developers use the infrastructure, but they're different orthogonal skills.
okay,
And I think I see orchestrators as the people who keep the agents working and running.
Okay.
And the builders using it. And builders, when they get bad experiences, are going to be working with the orchestrators, and there's communication and connection there, where there isn't a hierarchy.
Okay.
Okay.
But so I don't know if there is a book called 1984 where everybody is equal, right? Humans,
Yeah.
when they are equal, they don't know what to do.
Yeah.
That's what happens.
So the bit we haven't talked about, so orchestrators, it's engineering. Builders, is that engineering or is it product? Where do they sit? I think I feel like a lot of that builder work moves closer and closer to product, and at the extreme end is a product function rather than an engineering function. Builders work with product managers to closely collaborate on creating the things that are needed. That then gives you some sort of human structure.
Okay.
Orchestrators, depends on the size, depends on how many managers you need. But that hierarchy is probably collapsed from 3 layers of management to 1.
Maybe,
Yeah.
yeah. Like
Yeah.
other functionaries in software engineering, it's going to collapse. It's going to look different.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
having a hierarchy is safe for humans. They feel psychologically
I
safe.
think, yes. And one of the things I was talking to somebody the other day about that's important is how we train, coach, and guide people through the new roles, what that looks like, is an important part. And hierarchy exists in sometimes to try and do that. Not always convinced it's the best way to do that because it can lead to control. Don't like control. It's counter to kind of an innovative culture. So that we have to find, like, there isn't a right answer that's the perfect answer. Every company will find its way through that. I was talking the other day, we were talking about, does the role of the Scrum Master, servant leader in an organization, if Scrum goes away, but there's a need for that coaching and guidance of this broad set of builders working with product managers.
Yes.
To take the learnings from each and filter them back through continuously, and trusting that builders will do that on their own feels naive to that sense of people don't like to always share. They just like to get on with what they're doing. It's human nature. So a mechanism to do that is necessary. I feel like the use of those servant leader skills that are there is a good way of doing it, because we stress our managers in other ways that actually management doesn't do that very well. It likes to think it does, and we spend a lot of time talking to our managers about coaching and things like that. But there's a difference between coaching and kind of getting skills into place and knowledge sharing. So I'm thinking hard about that at the minute.
So what I wanted to bring at the end of this segment, hiring, is lead code and all that are going away. And even the interviews are getting consolidated to a round where you judge people on the 1 hour of conversation that you have with them on how they have taken decisions so far in either software or in their own life, and see a bit of technical skill as well, and they are good to go. Culturally, if they are fit for that particular role,
Culture is almost everything.
yes. Culturally, if they are fit for that role, they get hired and they can start building in the company, right? Yeah, sure. Okay. Let's move on to the third section. As we were talking about the builders and the operators, there is something called product oriented development that's been talked about a lot, right? And teams are trying to experiment how they fit in that part inside their own system of things, process of things, and all that. And it sounds really great on paper. Where do they fall apart? Where do you think they can fall apart?
Okay. So pods are effectively the first step towards a builder-orientated organization. They're taking small numbers of people to work on specific, usually largish tasks, directly with the subject matter expert and the product person. And by a fairly largish task, I mean sort of 6-man months. And generally, the aim of the pod is to collapse and remove the hierarchy, to eliminate the excessive documentation, and to create that kind of very fast build loop. And our experience with pods has been very positive. One of the greatest problems I see is the build loop is too fast for the subject matter experts and the product manager to cope with, and there's a new set of skills needed, a new set of techniques being developed to allow that to move faster. You know, subject matter experts are used to asking for software and it coming back 6 months later and then going away for another 3 months in the cycle, being at best monthly. With pods, that cycle is daily or faster. Then daily is about what the SMEs can cope with. And that pace is super helpful, but they can fall apart by moving too fast. And then actually, if your pod is large, doesn't have enough work to do, that either leads to people getting bored and frustrated, or them doing work that's not particularly necessary. Now, if we coach them the right way, having not enough work to do is a positive thing, because if we coach them the right way, those people will then invest their time in making that product or repo better so that their pod can move faster in the future. That's what should happen. It's going to take time to create that. So the pod that doesn't know what to do or doesn't have a plan for idle time is a risk. We will need to at some point talk about what happens to the customer experience when you have pod type pace, and how sort of the product manager way of working has to change as well. And some of that is product managers have to start to give up control. They cannot be the only interface into the customer now. You can't have that translation through. We've got to keep moving closer to the customer. So in some situations, if the customer's a subject matter expert, engineers directly working with the customer is important. Now, it's been interesting to watch forward deployed engineers, which takes that idea, but the other side tries to put engineers in the customer and then configure for them. I think I see that as a very good thing, but I see every engineer either being forward deployed or in the customer. We don't quite have a word yet for go to market deployed like on our side, but tied to the customer. There's a difference, and we have to find out what that word is. And I don't know.
You can coin one.
I don't know, because I want to call it, like, every word I come up with sounds ridiculous, so I haven't come up with a word yet. Like, you don't want to call them second deployed engineers or backward deployed engineers, or none of those work. So we have to come up with something. But builders close to the customers, that's the path that we're on. The challenges are on how they get access to all the things they need access to build fast enough. They also, if you're building at that pace, other parts of the organization have to cope with that pace. So we ran into problems with some of our infrastructure services where they were not geared up to stand up systems and get their systems ready in the time. They were reasonably good. They could turn things around in 48 hours. But that's 2 pod cycles. And so we had to think about how that moves faster and start to take out the manual parts of that process so that our pods can connect to those systems automatically and have that automatic. Now, really large companies have had the capacity to invest in that sort of thing for a long time. Some of them have, some of them haven't. You tend to only hear about the ones that have, which sounds like everybody does, but I don't buy that. So there's a need there. I think there's a need on the go-to-market side and what's produced and how that gets managed as well. And I feel like this is another example where we've known what to do, how to do things right for a very long time, but it's been hard to do. And so we generally have kind of avoided it. And you hear always about the people who have managed to make that investment, usually very crowy about it online. But things like feature flags. Feature flags will now become an essential requirement, not a nice to have good practice requirement. Because, when we were deploying weekly, so monthly, you didn't particularly care. 2 weekly, maybe you start to care about feature flags, but you do a little bit. You're daily, hourly, or less. You have no choice. And if those changes are minor, you'll get away with it. But what we're now seeing is 6 months worth of features deploying every week to 2 weeks. The volume of change that the user of a system can experience is quite overwhelming. And if there isn't a way of managing that, you break the customer. So you're always looking at the flow of work, and we started expanding our development, and we've slowly worked up and down the if you like, the SDLC, the classic SDLC, going, what's the next bottleneck? What's the next bottleneck? How do we make it fast? How do we make it bigger? Well, you get to the end, and the next one is the customer. You've just opened up this massive pipeline of flow that's just hitting the customer like a fire hose. And so you break the customer. If we don't have a plan for how do we not break the customer, we could be in trouble. And we start to see that customer stress. And I think that's a risk that we have to manage as we get the pods are taking it further, taking us closer. We have to be looking ahead at our constraints, and the customer is one.
Yeah. So what I see is when you want a pod and when you don't, right? So there are two scenarios. The first one is you are building a product from scratch. Okay. And you have seen the product market fit, everything works out, you will gain this much of revenue. When you're starting a pod, in that case, it makes perfect sense. You are not going to flood the customer with a fire hose. But if it is an established product and the license cost is quite high, and in that case is where the feature flagging and all that comes in.
I think it's less about not using a pod. It's more about knowing what you have to do.
Exactly.
So that the requirements going into the pod are not just product managers' requirements, but you have a set of non-functional requirements. For pods to work well, they need good automated tests. They need good pipelines and deploys, ideally canary deploys. They need front-end tests, playwright tests. They need feature flags. These should be things that are part of the work of the pod when the pod first starts. The pod should be spending some time making life easier for it and its customers before it then opens up its floodgates. Because if you start pushing a lot of code through, but you haven't got your automated tests, all you're going to do is put a QA person into that pod, and then you're going to open the fire hose up on the QA person. And so, and then you move it on to like the pipeline, and so you deal with that maybe by putting a DevOps person into the pod. Now you've got a pod that was maybe 2 developers and a tester and a DevOps person, and you're fire hosing the DevOps person. So you can't deal with that. So maybe you change your pod so it's only 1 developer, a tester, and a DevOps person. You're still fire hosing those, just a little bit less. And suddenly you go, okay, this is a problem. So now I'm going to put Scrum Master in there to coordinate this so you don't fire hose too often, or you maybe point the fire hose, the Scrum Master points the fire hose at the DevOps person and then turns it on the tester, and then you wait and you pause before you turn it back on the DevOps person. You know what you've ended up with?
Scrum
Scrum unit.
right. When we might also call them as bottlenecks, but you have defined a different word, firehouse, right? Yeah. Right now, like people are doing developments and there is less people to test, right?
Yeah.
Okay, this is interesting. So another thing that I wanted to ponder is, so when we talk about product managers, um, generally they have to influence, but they don't own anything, right? Um, there are, um, let's say delivery managers or engineering managers who manage the resources, but now they can influence more. In a pod, a product manager gets to own the resource as well. Previously, the structure had been like, I give a roadmap, the engineering manager or the delivery manager decides where the resource goes in based on the priority.
Yeah.
And there are other things that the engineering managers have to tackle as well. This layer, um, it's been a bit difficult, but let's say they'll still be there because there, there are people and that should be managers to manage these people, but it's not essentially Scrum where you manage the firehose. It gets closer to the product and the product gets to do more now.
Yeah.
The roadmap gets,
Yeah.
but I do think the product managers should exactly know what the pressure is on them right now. Like the product, let's not say product managers, but the product people should know the right thing to do so that, but they also get to pivot faster because they right now work very closely with the vendors. So the first day I made a wrong decision, I feature flagged it, but then the second day I know this is the right thing, so I can pivot faster, right? So
Yeah.
pods can be very useful for them, especially for the product people. Yeah. So you talked already about the client fatigue, right? So we might firehose them. But what about, how do we also make sure that the people on the other side are also not firehosed? We talked about the firehouse, but we didn't talk about how to manage that, right? Let's say you don't want a Scrum Master, but how do you actually not firehose someone? Any rules?
I think that's a difficult question to answer because we don't always know where our constraints are.
Mm.
As innovators and managers, we're trying to look ahead to where constraints are likely to be and redesign before the pressure gets there. We don't always know.
Mm.
And we will make mistakes and we'll get it wrong. And when that happens, we have to slow things down. Yeah, we have to turn that valve that just reduces the flow while we work out, okay, hang on, we opened it up too much, we had some problems. Shut it off a little bit, correct, understand, and make the change to be able to move forwards. I think there's a level of sort of confidence and bravery needed to do that. And it means organizations need to be able to stop things with confidence. We do all get a little bit obsessed with perceived commitment. We've said to the board that we can go 3 times faster, and then we find this problem when we're at 2 times faster. It comes back to honest conversation. Are we having the honest conversation? Said, we found something that's a problem, we're working on it, we're going to fix it. But look, don't forget we're 2 times faster. Whatever it is, but overexcitement and opening up the fire hose and hurting people is not the business we're in. I do also think one thing, picking up something you said around the product manager and ownership, it comes again back to, we know what good looks like, but we haven't always done it. So good has always been, to me, that the product manager owns P&L, owns security, owns, they are responsible to create a balance for the product. Their job isn't just feature firing. And where that doesn't happen, there's more to correct with a pod type approach than where that happens well. And I feel like we see that more and more. Like, we know what good looks like. We actually, to be able to lean into this acceleration, the more of our systems that are closer to good, the better. You see it in QA. We know that we should have playwright tests with really good coverage. We know that we should have excellent coverage over the critical features and paths. And we know that we need a certain level of kind of test coverage on unit tests. And we work really hard sometimes to try and get there. And we never quite get as far as we'd like, because there's always other pressures. AI takes all those other pressures away, because we can now start to get there. And so the combination of working to improve the quality of our operations, capabilities, whatever you want to call it, alongside giving the company some more pace, that's really important. And it's an important thing that when we start to accelerate our business, the worst thing we could do is give the business back all of that gain. The best thing that we do is we give back some of that gain and use the rest of the gain to keep making it better, to keep working the business towards a maturity level of code and systems that allows us to keep accelerating. And as you do the little bits of that, then you accelerate more, and you have a positive flywheel effect. If you give too much to the business, then it wants too much in return, and your systems aren't ready for it, and you fall over. I don't know, I'm sure there's great analogies for that, but you get the idea. It's a bit like it's finding that balance. We've been quite good within the organization. Proportion we give back is in proportion to the amount of time we spend on features and on BAU kind of maintenance activities. So we said we've grown, I think we're at about a certain percentage, and we've given that much percentage increase to the product team to create more. But that's also meaning that we're getting that much percentage increase for the BAU to solve some of these problems. Now, pods shift the arguments there, because they're suddenly, if we don't manage them carefully, you can give a massive amount to the business, and you forget all these other pieces, and the BAU doesn't catch up, which is why I'm very strongly like, okay, we're going to pod here, but the pod needs to know what it's got to do on the BAU side at the same time alongside. And you're not giving everything. The pod has to have control. And we've got to get management right on that balance. And it's really easy to swing the wrong way, one way or the other, and not be there, and get overexcited on this thing. And there's a lot of learning. There's no right answer. It is trial and error. We can keep erroring, and we'll keep trialing.
That's why the engineering managers with a bit of product knowledge, right? I mean, the product sense, let's say it's not knowledge, the sense, they would be excelling, especially having
I think
pods.
that's true. I think also we need to be clear to our pod people that this is okay. Like it's easy to get bogged down in my task is just do what the product manager says because we've asked them to work closer to the product manager.
Yes.
So we can't just rely on the engineering manager because the engineering manager has got further from the pod, if you like. They've moved away. They don't have that sort of level of control and authority that they had before, which is good. So we have to work that through. It will be a challenge.
Okay. Let's move on to segment 4. Okay. From SaaS to bespoke. You said SaaS companies may start to look like 1990s in our previous discussions. Like the software houses that were there in the 90s. Is that a step backward or a step forward?
I think it's full circle. On the business side, there's always been there's a famous quote, and I can't remember who said it, around bundling and unbundling. If you have a large set, you see it, maybe the best example of trying to articulate this is your mobile phone plan. For a while, mobile phone companies would sell you had a mobile phone with some inclusive minutes, and then you added on to it, you bolted on data, you bolted on if you wanted free calls, and you bolted on if you wanted international calls, and you bolted on if you need to send text messages, and you kind of added all these things up, and that came to the total of the bill. And then companies moved the other way and said, well, why don't we just make a bundle and you buy the bundle? Okay, so they do the bolt-ons because they can make more money that way. And then they bundle it up and make it look like an attractive price, but they bundled in the cheap to operate things. And so they make more money that way. And then after you've got used to buying bundles for a few years, it will shift back to, okay, now why don't you add some bolt-ons to your bundle? And there's new bolt-ons because technology has moved. And this bundling, unbundling process is just a way of shifting, and it helps companies to kind of create new product and therefore drive revenue through flexibility or efficiency. Because fundamentally, bundle is through efficiency, unbundle through flexibility. Software, I think, is like that, but on a much longer timescale. Software companies started and everything was custom. You wanted software, yeah, we'll build you what you want. And after a long time of doing that, you started to see software companies producing product. That was great, buy the product. And then you could choose. The adage was vanilla, configure. I can't think of the third one off the top of my head. Custom. And kind of a lot of the assessments was, okay, can we buy this as vanilla? We need to configure it. That's a bit more expensive and complicated. And we want fully custom. And then SaaS has lent us really strongly into buying product. And all those companies that were doing product or semi-custom, and quite often companies did that when they were small anyway, because they need the customers, moved to product because effectively they bundled their customers into buying the same thing. And there might be some customization over the top of that, but it's a massive amount of bundling generally that's happened. And it's driven a huge amount of efficiency, and it helps with margin because when you're selling a SaaS bundled product, you're selling it as ARR, So you know you're going to keep getting the revenue, and revenue reliability is appealing to everybody, rather than effectively trying to sell services or that build, which is a one-off, large investment. So your sales are much harder.
Mm.
I feel like as we move into the agentic era,
Mhm.
we are coming back around the circle to customize and customizable with some nuances. Like we have that bundle. It's like the phone plan. You've got the bundled plan, but now we've got new features.
Mm.
So you can bolt on those new features.
Mm.
And the new features in software development is you can have the workflow any way you like. We can join those together. We can build the front end that works for you. Okay, you don't need this piece because the way you're going to use the product in your organization is like this. Okay, well, let's change the front end to suit that. So we surface the right pieces of content and the right actions for your people. That bolt-on capability was just not practical 3-4 years ago. Now it's very, very practical. We might not technically be geared up for it, but that's a different problem. So I see us coming around, and SaaS companies will become much more flexible organizations. And this is one of those ways in which, as a SaaS organization, we can address that sort of sideways appeal. Maybe if I built it myself, it'd be fine. Of course, if you build it yourself, it probably won't be fine, but slightly different topic. We give that flexibility so the customers get more. We like that because we can take a greater piece of the revenue. A large SaaS implementation, the license is one piece, but the implementation costs are quite often 2 or 3 times the license cost. If we can say we reduce your implementation costs because we make product fit the slot you have, rather than make you change your organization to fit the product, then that's appealing to the customer and something they'll pay for.
Okay.
So we've opened up new opportunities through the flexibility of the code development. And this is why I don't think the cost saving angle is the right one to go after. This opportunity makes our products better, not this opportunity makes our products cheaper. I think that's really, really important.
Okay. Okay. So you talked about AI making a software implementation, customization implementation cheaper. Okay. So does that change the whole lot of product roadmap as well?
Yes. Very, very, very much so. There'll always be a product roadmap. But I think product roadmap and the delivery work start to come together. It's not uncommon for the product people to sit over here doing product roadmap, the delivery people to sit over here helping the customer who's just bought it on board and do things. I think as we move forwards with this bundling idea, the delivery and the product come together. There's still a need for the product roadmap because the product roadmap deals with the things that the customers don't know they want. Okay. Really, really important. We don't just build for what the customer knows they want, because the customer only knows what they want when somebody else has it. So a lot of our work is you build for what the customer doesn't yet know and help them to move forward. Otherwise, you never get that light bulb moment when you go into customer. But the delivery moves closer, is almost now becoming a feeder into the pipeline. So roadmap is not dead, but it now has 2 lanes, 2
And it
streams.
evolves too faster, right?
Yeah. It will evolve faster. Some things will always sit in the slow lane on the roadmap because it's of advantage to us to think sometimes. I think rushing ahead with everything is not always a good idea. Then we're drifting into time to think how we do that. Like, there is a danger that we rush, and what we've produced is like anything we rush through. Untidy, schooly, not joined up, missing, blah blah blah. So that there's that stream, and then there's the stream of things we need to do to deliver for the customer. And there's a lot of hype around that. Might be you're in a customer meeting, the customer says they want blah blah blah, and you go deliver it, and they've got it by the end of the meeting. It's lovely. It's not reality because it's okay, you can do that in Redcliffe, but I'm not going to put that into production. So there's a roadmap piece for deliveries of just that needs control, management, engagement with the customer, and all that stuff. So I think that's important. But roadmaps are super important.
Okay, I just want to bring in an old, client. Let's not talk about a particular client, but any product that's been standardized, right? Let's say I'll give only this, and there are n number of customers for that particular product, which says I'll give only this, and they're happy with it. But then there comes a customer who says, you just provide me this. The scale of business I'm going to bring you in is different than what the other 300 set of customers that you already have. And let's say this before AI, someone has bought this, and you go ahead with the implementation and all that. The customization that you bring in and the revenue that it brings in is different than what. Let's say a similar customer comes in now, right? And says, don't give me this, vanilla, because this product has always been a vanilla. Give me chocolate ice cream and I'll pay you this much. What is the cost of AI, building with AI, versus the cost of building before having AI for the chocolate ice cream?
Okay. So we've always done the chocolate ice cream versions of things. I think the difference now is the financial costs have not changed hugely.
Okay.
The cost is the people, or the impact on the roadmap for everybody else, cost has gone down because that work can be done faster. So therefore, all the other customers are not waiting as long for their next new feature. So that used to be a big problem. If you stopped to spend 6 months on chocolate ice cream,
Okay.
You're in danger of not delivering very much value for all the other customers that year. So that risk goes down. I think if your feature flags are good, you can feature flag just chocolate ice cream to that one customer, and nobody else notices, which makes it easier to deviate from your desirable sort of presentation. For example, if you have vanilla ice cream and everybody's getting vanilla, you don't always want to tell all your customers that there's also chocolate ice cream.
Okay.
So that becomes easier. Beyond that, I think it's largely the same.
Okay. Yeah, got it. But you should also be worthy of being getting that chocolate ice cream, because you have to bring in that revenue to that product. So from what you told, what I understand is you can build faster now, chocolate ice cream as well, and keep the vanilla ice cream happy as well, right?
Yes. I think we probably start to move into a situation where we don't have to say no to a customer quite as often.
Yes. Nice. Yeah. Okay. We are in the field of financial data, right? And it is a very regulated space.
Yeah.
So many regulations, irrespective of the country that we are operating from. So, based on these regulations, how much it gives us a safety net? How away are we from disruption? Right? How safe are we from disruption? When I say disruption, it's, I'll probably use this example where Xerox was not a thing when Xerox actually wanted to do that, right? And they still went with that. And every company that audited them said you would be a failure because there has been nothing like that before. Um, Being in a regulatory space, we get the safety net of, even if we are not disrupting, we get some safe space. But how much is of that is true when it comes to, AI and disruption, especially with a regulated data space?
Okay, complicated question for me to answer. I think first of all, it's worth saying there are a few things that create a moat. Companies with moats are always more interesting than companies without. So things that create moats at the minute, subject to change. Say Xerox, the moat changed. Also, Kodak is a good example of moat changing. I think the moats at the minute are the data. If the data that you have in control is hard to access, then that gives you an advantage. Or if you have a data cycle where you collect data from one party and it's used by another party and that passes back, and you're sat between those two parties enabling that data cycle, that's quite powerful. And that leads on to the second one, which is network. If you have a network where there's a benefit to all the companies of being joined together through you as an organization, then that's hard to replace because establishing building networks is truly tricky. And regulation. If there's a force pushing you at certain activities or making you do activities, then those activities usually have to be done in quite a precise and marking way. And generally that's easier done with a partner. I'd say, as I was thinking about this a lot, regulation is probably actually the weaker one of those. Regulation usually asks you to do things. It doesn't define how or with whom you'll do those things. There are a few exceptions. There are a few organizations that say we only work with these software providers, therefore you must use them. But regulation causes you to have to do things, but it doesn't cause you to have to do things with particular vendors, and therefore it is a moat, but it's not a great deep moat. So as a software provider in a regulated industry, I don't know that the regulations that an effective part of how we think about things as a business. If we sit on our hands and think of ourselves as a regulated entity, then it's likely that somebody else can still come through. So we have to be proactive and thinking ahead of what needs to happen, what's going to happen with regulation, how do we stay with it, how do we partner with the organizations that are going to be affected, all of those things. What makes regulation interesting for me is it's a driver of change, particularly in financial services. It's been driving change, and it's like as soon as one regulation comes out, they're on to thinking about the next version of it, and that 2-3 year cycle starts all over again. So that drives activity, but it doesn't force adoption.
Okay.
Choice.
In that perspective, right? So let's come to AI a bit and say the finance industry is actually building with AI, right? But I don't think there are enough regulations across the world, to say this is how you need to interact with, the financial application that you are using, right? I mean, how you expose your application to the agents. There are no regulations around that, right?
But there are regulations around that. So in Europe, GDPR is a very powerful force there. 27001 and SOX 2 equally apply. Those underlying needs to say you need to be able to identify who did what. Who can be an agent, but we need to be able to identify the agent and what the agent did.
Okay.
So agent identity becomes a significant issue of how we think about that. So the agent must be treated like any other entity, being able to make change. Minimum levels of access, auditable, traceable, secure. Those things now apply to the agents, and those constraints and those rules exist already. I don't think there's a need for more regulation. Yeah, I think I'd covered it pretty much. I'm just trying to think what I've missed.
What
Yeah.
I wanted to ask was, are the regulations really catching up, or with the AI, or?
I think for a lot of AI, the existing regulations work really well. I think there are some high risk uses of AI that present interesting challenges and concerns. We're fortunate that largely they don't particularly apply to us. And they are really around protecting people.
Okay.
So how anybody handles CV data, makes decisions against CVs where the aim might not be as balanced as we would like. And I think possibly in a few other areas, but I think the people angle is particular one. Medical is the other. These are things that are already defined in the European laws as high risk activities, because they can have significant outsized impacts or a fairness impact. But in general, use of AI really just falls within the existing legal frameworks.
Okay.
And we have to think of it as such. I think there has been a tendency to sort of skip over and not think too much about the identity and agents. That's definitely an area that's really developing quickly. A lot of companies coming out with some really good work in that space that allows us to manage identities, and we've been doing work internally on what we think about agent identity and how we track and do that. And that's built on the work that we did right back at the start on observability and tracing of all our LLM interactions, and being able to effectively build good data sets for testing and evaluating LLM interactions. It's been foundational to a lot of the work we do. So I feel like we're lucky for us. We already have that investment. And I think it will be a challenge as these things grow and explode. If you don't have that foundational auditability, traceability capability, then it's a significant cost to be considered and added, and it will be a drag on implementation. And it's probably one of those things that's slowing companies moving from proof of concept to production. Because as you hit production, that stuff really matters.
So what you're telling is building over and above on these already available regulations would be enough for the AI agents, along with the traceability and identity where they are coming from and what they are doing. That would be the right thing for softwares.
Yeah, like don't go wild. It's just, it reminds me of way back when, and we were the .com, and there was very little thought about how to secure things, how to keep things safe, what good looked like, and that evolved very quickly, and there was a lot of work to bring things through and raise standards. The same thing will happen with agents.
Okay.
I think this, for me, the safe way to think about it is if you take the same approach to agent security as you take to human security, then you're probably in a good place of thinking about it.
Okay.
You know, agents have the same level of autonomy. And like people, they will follow the rules given. If you haven't given the rule, they won't follow it, and they will try and solve the problem. And that leads to some interesting outcomes. And therefore, like a human, we have to wrap them with controls and safety.
Okay.
Keeps everybody safe.
Right. Got it. I think we covered everything here. This we should have talked a little bit earlier when we were actually talking about the builders and the operators, but we are still operating like developers, QA, and all that, right? So we need to have an attitude shift. It's
Yes and no.
Mm.
I'm not entirely sure that the answer is to force developers to become testers. Some companies have managed to do that and got rid of their testers because the developers do it. I think the change is different now. I want our testers to become builders. Some of our test engineers have become the most prolific builders and have lent in very strongly. They have fantastic talent for that. And this is because the agents has unlocked a capability that wasn't there before. Quite often, testers have the vision for the product, an understanding of how it should be. And so as builders, they have an advantage. They go in with that capability, that's that future state capability. And we have to help them out of the assumption that they can't do it because they're testers and not developers. I think that's an important part. But I don't think that was what you meant by the question. I think one of the changes that we make is you have to get explicit about there not being testers. But we don't have to make the developers into testers. We want the developers to become builders. What we have to make sure happens is that our agents are good testers. And so coming back to the theme of if it's good practice, we should do it, and it's become more important with AI, TDD for me is very important.
Mhm.
Like, TDD is brilliant in theory. With humans, it's really horrible. Like, if you try and do it, it's uncomfortable. You have to think about things from the finished end backwards, not from the start of creation towards the finish. And it's really easy to get it wrong, and you start TDD and then you come back and find halfway through development that you'd forgotten something in your thinking, and it's generally very, very painful. And there's very few people able to really do it really well. The advantage we have with AI agents is they don't have those problems. They can do that really well. And so they can think it through and create all the tests first and then build the code for the tests.
Mhm.
They don't tend to want to because they've been educated on our code and our ways of working, but we can tell them to. And so shifting to a TDD approach inside the agent is a really powerful approach to having confidence in the output. If you want to check the TDD output before the agent builds the code, then you can. It helps to stop kind of confusion by the agent as it builds. You get two goes at that creation process. You get the TDD and then the coding. And that I think is extremely powerful. There's also the benefit of its slightly lower cost, because building tests without any code gives the agent flexibility.
Mm.
Trying to divine what the code means and wrap it in tests is very energy consumptive and quite time consuming. So there's an advantage in our test quality starting with TDD, and there's an advantage in cost of operations starting with TDD. So my view is a strong lean into TDD drives a better outcome, doesn't then require the engineer, the developer, to become a test expert, because that becomes a function of the code generation. They do need skills at times to be able to challenge and assess test quality and coverage. And I think that's something we'll all have to work on, how you teach that skill. It also comes down to the operators, and I think that will be a significant component of the operators, and having people with good test experience can ensure the guidance to the engineering agent is strong and effective. I think the extension of that also is in the front end tests with Playwright. I am not a fan of non-deterministic testing by agents. I think it's unreliable. I think it's expensive. I think it's vague. It's probably about saying worse quality than asking test engineer to do exploratory testing all of the time. Like, you get test fatigue. You don't know whether you're going to test that bit today or tomorrow. You do it occasionally, but what you want to come out of that exploratory testing is more test cases, more deterministic outcomes. And so I'm a fan of asking the agent to review the test cases and kind of the Playwright style through the browser, and to look for new ones and to build new ones, ideally build new ones before it's built code. but those should always end up being deterministic playwright test cases that can be automated and not here, have a go at the system and see if it's okay.
Okay.
So yeah, it's a difference, I think, between lazy use of agents because they can and structured, intentional testing that's of high quality.
Okay. As you said, I mean, there is no need of forcing developers to be a test engineer, but there needs to be a framework that can help them, enable them to actually know that whatever they have developed is actually working, including if we follow TDD, that's what is going to happen, is what you're concluding, right? Okay. But we are dealing with humans, okay? Why do you think a developer resists testing?
It's difficult and it's not creative.
It's creative.
It's not creative in the way the developer thinks of creation.
Yeah,
So the developer writes code and that's their creativity. They don't.
but
They
right
don't
now
want
it's
to
not
know
the
whether-
most creative process that they have. They are going to do, right? So
It is in their minds. It's where they see their value. We have to teach them that the value is not just in that code creation. And we've done this separation, like we've said, developers, your value is in creating features and code. Testers, your value is in finding bugs. And it's quite difficult to say to the developers now your value is in finding bugs as well. So, you know, what we accidentally say to the developers is your value is in creating bug-free code.
maybe.
Yeah, it's like perfectionism polish, isn't it? And so we have to find a different way of articulating it to the developers. That brings it back to the value to the business or some other metric that's relatable, and has feeling. I think it's something when you put the developer, the estate, whoever the builder close to the customer, and the developer and the customer product manager are working together. Why would you ever want to show to your customer something that doesn't quite work?
Right.
Like you've joined up that link, that value. That's so important. When the developer's 5 people away from the customer, well, what's the quality in it? Yeah, the psychology of quality is much, much, much more difficult. And so personally, I don't worry about it hugely because I feel like if we can solve the builder and customer kind of connectivity problem, builders are going to want to produce something that's great. I feel like it's one of the advantages of forward deployed engineers. They're in at the customer all the time and they're showing the customer, and therefore they want it to work. They need it to work. You know, they're right there in the room having to say, my stuff works well or it doesn't. They've got, for want of a better word, skin in the game. They've got their reputation on the line. If you're further away, abstract, the development team, this amorphous blob of people we don't understand over here made a mistake. Okay. Responsibility by being close to the person that consumes your stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does that not add too much pressure to people who actually were 5 steps away? Right now, what you are asking is they were already 5 steps away, right? Now you're putting them closer. There is responsibility, but is it not unfair to expect them right away to be, you know, take so much responsibility. It was not in the job description when I was 5 steps away, but now it has come to a stage where I have to be very responsible, right?
I think it was no, I think that's fine. I I I think it was kind of expressed when they were 5 steps away, but didn't feel like it mattered. I believe it will feel like it matters. People do work when they feel it matters. We're not asking for anything different. We're sort of making it feel like it matters more.
Got it. You have suggested that, QA thinking might be more valuable than coding in agentic world. Do you have a case for that?
I think it comes back to talking about that ability to hold the ideas in your mind, the perception of what it should be. And our QA engineers, we've built that muscle. The devs haven't built that muscle so much. If they get a description of the piece of work to be done, and it is in abstract to the small piece of work to be done, they don't have to hold the idea of the whole product. And so that's why I think QAs can be at an advantage in this change. I think the best example I have would be as we introduced coding agents into the organization, the people that embraced it most effectively were the QA team who were just unlocked. And could then, they had ideas, they had needs, they could express them. So that came through very fully. And I see it elsewhere as well, where people who are close to the way things happen and the way things work and the way things should be are in the best place to express the next stage of improvement or the work that has to be done. People who are purely in the execution of their small piece will find it harder because they have to learn up and out into the bigger view of the world and then express. So we see it sometimes with managers who see the whole process and the challenges, and we see it less with the people who are in that space. You only see the space you're in. It's very hard to see the opportunity that surrounds. And I think this is one of the challenges we have to overcome. There are a need to help everybody understand that bigger opportunity space of how things are, how things work. I don't know how we're going to do that, but we're going to lean in on the people who are seeing it and kind of build a treadmill or whatever it is, a cycle of doing more and more. And I think we've seen it as we've put change into other parts of the business, that leads to an unlocking of what could be done and an increase in that change. So once you have a bit of transformation, people start to go, oh, okay, now I can see the box moving and I can see the space that I'm in moving. And okay, now because I see it moving, I can imagine other things and I can start to get outside of that. And there's an opportunity then to come up with new ideas and say, okay, now that we've moved this, I understand this. And so what about if we did that? And so that starting movement and change is really the trigger. And how we as organizations talk about it with our staff and encourage that thought is really, really important to that process.
I do see the shift working very closely with my team of QA people and the QA community. I see the shift where we are right now not just testing. We are we have already been thinking about the product, right? But right now, if there is a bug, do I wait for the developer or I just fix and put a PR, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Why do I have to wait for a developer?
Yeah.
Let them do the
We
deployment.
have to start to do that. Like QA's fixing bugs it is the future.
Yes.
We will also have to coach our management teams through what is now becoming the prejudice that only developers can create code. And there's a re-education piece that we have to work through because our creators become all kinds of people. And there's a sense of only our developers can create code because of quality and maintainability. Well, if you have your operators and you have your maintenance systems in the right place, that's completely untrue. So your maintenance systems take care of operating stability and kind of reliability and patching and other things that, let's be honest, is the detail that developers, let alone creators, don't want to care about, but needs to be done with. And like we force it on the developers at the minute. I think we have an opportunity to force it on the agents to free everybody up from that. And then once you're succeeding in that kind of need for the sense of the developer to be fixing it and reason for being diminishes, and our ability to embrace creators of all types into our creative process through going builders expands substantially. And so there is this kind of link. We will lean into pods, but we then have to lean into how we do operations and maintenance, which allow us to grow that pod piece, which evolves us towards operators, which evolves us to deeper pods and creators outside of the engineering organization. And so it's kind of step by step by step by step by step, we unlock the creative potential of everybody in the business to create tools and systems and products that solve problems for the organization and the customer.
Right.
And that's effectively what I see my job as, is unlocking that creative potential.
Cool. That was really nice. Yeah. So if you want to retrain the entire engineering team right now, right, where will you start?
I think we start with the non-technical pieces of idea to concept, try to create something, idea to concept. I think we start by encouraging people to challenge, have a go. And as an organization, that probably means that we have to be good at our psychological safety. Everybody's learning through this, and so there's little to go wrong, but we need to help everybody reach a stage of kind of being comfortable being challenger safe. I think we have huge numbers of people that are learner safe, and quite a lot that are challenger, but that's got to grow. And psychological safety is part of it, but there's also once you get there, there's a recognition you can stay there. It's like people who get used to challenging, they need less psychological safety the 5th, 60th, 70th time they challenge. They start to be able to challenge in less comfortable situations. So that's really important. So I think we have to work through that. It's not so much a learning thing, but it's an organizational thing. Again, comes back to best practice. I think there's a little bit of learning the techniques and the technical skills of working with agents. I think there's a little bit of understanding what the agent already knows and what it doesn't know, and how what works, what doesn't. I'd say that's at the same level or below the non-tech skills. So we need to get through that.
Sorry again. Ready whenever you are.
Okay, cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, so backtrack a bit. I think that the non-technical skills, the ones that we need to exercise now, we are naturally building the technical skills. Those are coming because everybody's using, like, we have nearly 100% users of AI. So we don't need to teach that. We need to coach and guide the other skills. They are harder to learn. It's not quite so clear what learning them is. And so we have to put our effort there. Because if we only teach the technical, we'll have a fantastic set of agent users. It won't be builders, they won't be creators. They won't be able to move out of that hierarchical kind of control space.
Cool. Yeah. I think we are almost at the end of the podcast.
Cool.
We have covered all the questions.
Yes, brilliant.
That we wanted to talk about. Thanks for your time, Richard.
It's been fun.
Yes. I mean, diving deeper into the intricacies of not just AI and whether an engineer would get replaced with AI, but also talking about the psychological safety and how people can actually navigate through this time, right? And how they can develop themselves in areas that were not obvious previously, right? That was a very good thing to talk about. Thank you so much for your time.
It's been a lot of fun. Thank